Thank you so much, and we're very happy to be here in A.K.T and show our work and also to talk to each other. And actually the chair that Janusz is now taking, we were both discussing the importance of the empty chair in Jewish tradition. This is the chair of Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Eliyahu, and during Passover, which is one of the most important Jewish holidays, the chair is left empty. And in the context of this exhibition titles, Bodies That Matter, having this empty chair, especially on today, which is Idahobit, the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, Biphobia, having this empty chair in the context of Bodies That Matter, because Bodies That Matter says two things. Bodies that matter, but also in it there is the implication of bodies that don't matter, bodies that you don't see. You know, who is a good enough body to be seen and which bodies are not. And that's really, I think, our starting point in our conversation here is which bodies matter.
Which bodies matter, the visible and the invisible, the present and the absent, which is a subject, I think, of both of our works. And we just heard a talk that went all about science and the relation of the body in science. And I think we will probably go a completely different way, coming from a more personal approach.
Well, we can say that one of the issues with science is what body of knowledge is considered good and which body of knowledge is considered not. Because we're ignoring a lot of knowledge that is considered not scientific, but yet it brings the light to the world. But yeah. Sorry, guys. And I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, it's the bodies that matter, the bodies that might not matter, the matters of body, which I guess is very strongly in the work we are sitting next to now.
Yeah, it's which bodies it's okay to show, which bodies is not okay to show. We're flooded by images from advertising of idealized bodies, and at the same time, there's a lot of bodies that we are not showing, that are completely invisible, and that are completely not seen. And those are bodies that live on the streets, bodies that are shaped wrong, bodies that are fat, bodies that are gay, bodies that are trans.
Which is all invisible if it's covered in beautiful, powerful T-shirts.
Stonewall was a riot.
So the clothing might actually hide the body from its visibility.
Yeah, I mean, the body is political. It's only the most privileged bodies that get to not be political, that get to rest. Certain bodies, every moment of existence is a political issue. Trans bodies, with particularly trans women of color, average age is 30. Trans women of color is 35. So that's the average age. Life expectancy is very short. So, this is part of the bodies that are missing and the part of the bodies that we have to show. And part of, for me, in becoming was to show the idea instead of before and after, which I find personally very boring, show that gender is a process that never ends. And we all keep changing as we age, and aged bodies, again, in our society are definitely not valued as much as young bodies because reasons. And that's also...
So is shape possibly more important than the gender, than the sex signs?
Honestly, I really don't get gender so much. I mean, people are obsessing about it, especially Western perception of gender is really obsessive, and I don't get it. And somebody should probably explain it to me, but I just don't really get it.
Are we talking about gender or sex? Biological, bodily differences that we are obsessed with as the differentiating
Well, I mean, we are obsessed in knowing pretty much who we're going to fuck. That's pretty much our obsession. And that's kind of, especially with straight guys, they divide the world as who they're going to fuck and who they're not going to fuck. And they have to know really quickly which one is which. And that never made sense to me personally, and I think it doesn't make sense to many people.
But
to
becoming
divide them.
is a change of the body, not just in this very obvious sense that we would probably put on it as a transition from one sex to another sex by.
But from my perspective,
to me, it's more a change in shape as well, as you said, with aging.
From my perspective, it's becoming is. I never changed sex. I'm the same woman I always was. My gender is really boring. There are people with incredible genders that change, that are exciting, that have so many multitudes. My gender is really boring. I was always a woman. And the reason I made becoming is because I got bored with so much of the violence. And because I think my genitals are really like tiny bit of the picture. Most of the interesting part for me in this is my hair that keeps changing. That's like interesting. I can watch that for hours. The genitals, you look at it once, that's it. I mean, it's boring. Why keep looking there?
Well, and it's the body going wider and smaller by circling around. It's the shape of the body that changes drastically through the technique.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to project this because I find projection, we have a context of unreality in projection. And I didn't want to project because I feel this has to be real. That's why I actually used actual prints to do this and created this non-projected film technology because I wanted this to be real. And I just had to have it more real than what we can do with projection, because projection, we see so many fake things projected. Projection has a context that I didn't want my body to have, and that's also the size of the artwork is deliberately large, so it has an equal relationship with the viewer, so there is no power differential. Body. Yeah, I mean, we see not with our eyes, we see with our whole body. The way we interact with things is with our whole body. We just think we see with our eyes because that's what we are taught, that everything is separate, but we see with our whole body.
So what you mean when you say it's real, it's physically there, whereas a projection is ephemeral.
More, to be precise, it's more real.
I didn't want to go that road. I just thought because this is there, because it's prints and it's actually light on prints. It's not an image that comes and goes, although we might see it by circling as coming and going. And it has a physical
presence. I mean, this is half a ton of steel. Half of it is traveling. So there's 250 kilos traveling at 11 kilometers an hour to create animation. That's a physical presence. You can't dismiss it as something non-existent. It's real. You can touch the thing. It's there.
Yeah, and it doesn't disappear when I turn off the lights. It will still be there.
It will still be there.
So what about a bodily memory?
Well,
memory is the second issue I think we both touch on.
Well, I think it's not separate, and both of us remember through our body, because a body is not just a way of seeing. A body is a way of hearing, of smelling, and of remembering. And those things, those senses are not separate. And I think this is what we talk about in your work, is the remembering. The physicality of remembering is a very precise science. Let me use the word science. But it is a very precise science, or it should be a very precise science, because one step to the left or one step to the right changes it. Changes, in your interaction with the object.
It keeps changing anyway. My memory keeps changing with every experience I have.
Yes, but
and my bodily experience changes constantly. So the question for me is, does the body remember? And yes, it does. And if the body remembers, then your work is very much about the bodily, the impossibility of not remembering. with the body, whereas my work is very much of the trying to find a possibility to not remember through material.
Well, I don't really, when I do work, I don't really think so much. I do things, and my work, the Number Project, is about my relationship with my mother and my inheritance from her. My mother had the Auschwitz number tattooed on her arm, and she could never speak about it, so she removed it surgically the second she could. And then she had a white scar, and that's really our relationship with the Holocaust. We never talked about it because she couldn't. And when I worked with all my demons a bit more, I really wanted to take on that number, and I wanted to carry that number on my body. I didn't want to tattoo it because I feel that tattooing, the Auschwitz tattoo is sacred, and we should not change that. We should not recontextualize it.
That was also your mother's body's memory, the tattoo.
Well, it's not separate. The tattoo, her body, removing it.
But when you say it's sacred, then it's these people's memory that is inherited in
the image of the Auschwitz tattoo is something sacred in our should be something sacred in our society, and artists that are using it and recontextualizing it without ethical thought, I object to it on ethical grounds. That's why I used branding to do my mother's number, because I felt that I can work with the number without changing the context of the Auschwitz tattoo. And carrying that number as it healed, but it never fully healed, was really important for me.
Well, it shows the scar on the surface, but it's impossible not to remember when you come from this history. It's impossible not to remember. You can't ignore the memory. You can't ignore it bodily.
Well, yes. I mean, traumatic memories behave in two opposite ways. In one way, the traumatic memory is trying to distract you from it in every possible way. And at the same time, it indirectly keeps pointing to the same point. And that duality of hiding and pointing at the same time is one of the ways that you can recognize traumatic memories. And this duality is life-threatening, because until you're ready to face these memories, your body will go to extremes in order to hide them from you till you're ready. And you might never be ready in this generation, and you might never be ready in the next generation. And this constant struggle between pointing to that and distracting to it is very powerful.
But I think that what meets in my work, meeting your work, is this impossibility of not memorizing with the trial not to memorize, to build a memorial in order to ignore the memory, because it's not a bodily memory, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, the memorials is one of those ways that you try to distract from the memory, because most memorials are a way of externalizing a memory, not to having to deal with it.
But you can only do that if the memory is not deeply inscribed in your body, I guess.
I would disagree. I would say that you do it. When you can face it, you do it. I mean, most people prefer to run away from the memories. And that's why you have monuments that are about that over there instead that which is in here. And the real courage is facing inwards and seeing what's within you.
And you see that on both sides, the victims as much as the perpetrators.
I think taking responsibility is very critical, because it's much easier to have a system that makes you feel better, and that's truly privileged, than to actually take responsibility. And I don't separate victim or perpetrator.
And is the responsibility also inscribed in the body, as much as the memory is?
Well,
You can ask questions.
I love the hard questions, and it's a really good question because the responsibility drives you, and if you don't bring it out, it will kill you. But at least it drives me. I mean, that's what I do mostly. Is I go to places of trauma and bear witness to others. Originally, I started with my own narrative, and as I've grown up a little bit as a human being, I've started to change what I do, and now I bear witness to the trauma of others, and I watch cultural specific inheritance of traumatic memories. I think that's part of me taking responsibility, because all of us, by our existence, cause harm. And while some of us are a lot more privileged than others, we still all have to take responsibility. And we are taught mostly that we should make ourselves feel good. And that's not really a way to find peace.
Define good.
Well,
Define
okay,
good.
Okay. I'm talking about distracting yourself, blaming it outside of you and not inside you, because this is something inside you that you have to confront. I mean, it's all the monsters that you have inside you, and taking responsibility is seeing how much harm you cause too. It's not just how much suffering you've had. Mm-hmm. And in terms of bodies that matter, not fitting into societal constructed reality that in a way drives both of our works, because not fitting in is a responsibility. Having that outside perspective of not ever fitting in, not ever being able to rest, is part of what drives both of us.
Does it drive all art?
I'm responsible for this body.
Okay. Fair enough. So it drives your art, it drives probably my art. It doesn't have to drive all art, because we're not talking about all art.
I think what we're talking about, I don't really know yet, but I think what we're talking about is really, why are we making art? And is it important? And that taking...
And who says what is important? Who judges what is important?
I say what's important within this body and mind.
So you are responsible for your monsters,
this
your
mind
trauma,
heart. This mind heart decides for this whatever.
So we don't decide for everybody else.
Isn't that called fascism?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make this clear. They were not thinking about everybody else's responsibilities.
No.
But our own.
Yeah, and I mean, both.
And hopefully reach out to other people to think about their own. But it's up to them to do that.
But this is really it. Today in this world, especially on a day against homophobia and biphobia and transphobia. Oh yeah, especially on today. And when we see this and the number of projects, we're looking at the Holocaust, and yet in the United States, since the beginning of this year, over 500 anti-trans legislations have passed, barring trans people from everyday life. And
pretty much invisible to the world, I would think, unless you're really interested in it.
But it's sitting here in Germany, where we know about the Nuremberg laws, and we see these Nuremberg laws being enacted in the world, comes the question, I think at least for a second generation to the Holocaust. I always said if I was born at the time of Hitler, I would have killed Hitler. But really, what I would have done in the time of Hitler is exactly what I'm doing today. And that's taking responsibility. Because what you're doing today is exactly what you would have done then. It's just this time it's trans people and migrants.
And this time you have to act. And what you would have done is very much a fantasy and a hope that you could have been strong enough to do that.
Well, and this is the part of
it gives you a chance nowadays to actually act on it.
This is the difference between distracting yourself and actually doing something.
Distracting and acting.
Yeah. It's a time when we ask for questions.
Maybe if there are questions, or it's just the time to leave people, have a look at the works, get some drinks, food, get into conversations, exchange about responsibilities.
Or find a dark corner and cry, whatever is needed.
I thought you say find a dark corner and fuck, but you say find a dark corner and cry. It's even worse.
Can do both.
So don't find a dark corner, just try to find interesting works, get into exchange, talk to us or to other people. We're very happy about that.